What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here at GSD Studios. First off, thank you so much for checking out today's content. I'll make this extremely fast, but I need to plug our sponsors that make this show possible. Our first sponsor is PerfectStormNow.com, by far the most effective and affordable real estate agent website and database platform in the industry. It is the system I use to sell 50 plus homes every single month. Check it out at www.perfectstormnow.com. Our second sponsor is my personal 90-day mastery bootcamp, which is, again, my personal real estate agent mentorship program where we spend 90 days together, 12 live sessions. You get daily access to me inside the program. You guys, we go so extremely in-depth. There's nothing that's incomplete about this program. You're going to get all the tools that you need to go out there and crush it inside your real estate business. Make sure to go check us out, www.90daymastery.com. You can watch in-depth videos of exactly what's covered to see if the program is for you. See all the raving testimonials we have from all of the amazing agents and clients that went through the program. So make sure to check us out, www.90daymastery.com. All right, you guys, let's jump on into today's content. What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD mode interview. Every single week, we interview top entrepreneurs and just those that are out there dominating their space, that are choosing to not live a life of mediocrity, but instead to go out there and create big, amazing, epic lives for themselves, their families, as well as have a big impact on others' lives while they exist. So today, you guys got a very special guest, a guest I'm really, really excited to have on the show today. So our guest today, you guys, is an inspirational survivor, speaker, and author. His thoughts on leadership have made him an internationally sought-out speaker. He does hundreds and hundreds of speaking events all throughout the United States and internationally. Let me just give you kind of a quick backstory to lead into this. So 30-plus years in sales, over a decade of working for and working directly with Tony Robbins, but also U.S. Airways Flight 1549, which you guys will know it more as the miracle on the Hudson, right? The plane crash that happened on the Hudson River. Dave, our guest today, was the last passenger to get off of the plane, and not because he was sat in the back and that was the only choice, right? He chose to stay back, sacrifice potentially his own life to make sure that everybody else was safe, everybody else was taken care of, and again, in that moment, choosing to do the right thing, even at potentially, with sacrificing his own life. So really, really stoked and honored to have our guest, Dave Sanderson, on the show. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm truly excited to be with you today, man. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, man. Talk about a guy that lives in GSD mode, right? I can't even fathom, what that was like and what that day was like. But before we get into that, do you think, you had a 30 plus years sales experience, very successful in sales, working directly with Tony Robbins, right? For 10 plus years. Because when you were in that moment, on the Hudson or on the plane crash, do you think that all those years of that led up to that helped you make that right decision and become that step into that leader that you did in that moment?
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you saying it, because I think it's exactly what happened. And that's why I wrote the book, Moments Matter, because what I realized after the plane crash is all those moments in my life that you didn't mark up for anything, and they just passed through your life. Some of those moments really mattered that day, like how to manage people's minds when all hell's breaking loose, right? Communication modalities and understanding how people talk to each other and make sure you can communicate in a highly effective way in a very critical situation. All these things that I learned, whether it's in sales or with Tony or just the values my parents gave to me, I think all came together and coalesced at that moment.
Yeah. Love it, man. So kind of walk us through like what that day was like. Like where were you heading? Like what was, if that didn't happen, like what was that day supposed to look like? And then walk us through kind of, cause again, it's just something I can't even fathom.
So it was the end of a 3-day business trip. I started in Sarasota, Florida, went to Petersburg, Virginia, and ended up in Brooklyn, New York. In my job, I was a sales manager. And that day, Canley, normal day, Nothing out of the ordinary. I traveled usually anywhere from 2 to 4 days a week in my business. So, just going through the motions like most people do. And, we started in a warehouse or a distribution center. And I tell people that if you've never been or worked in one of those, they open up really early in the morning. This one opened up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, to get the full impact of the day, we started our day at 5 because we wanted to be right in the middle of all the stuff that was going on. You don't want to come in late or just clean it up. So we started our day at 5 just to get going, but we got done at 10. Now, normally we don't get done until 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then you leave some time for travel to the airport. So I always booked the last flight out. So when I got done at 10, I'm like, man, I can get out here early, get home for an early weekend. So I called the travel agent at 10 o'clock, and she's the one that put me on flight 1549. So I was not even supposed to be on that plane. I had a first-class seat at 5 o'clock. I was sitting up front, nice and easy, until I traded in. Because once you trade it in, right, it's like you get whatever seat you can get. And I was in seat 15A. So nothing out of the ordinary that day. It was just it was snowing, 11 degrees. But what do you expect in New York City in the middle of the winter, right? That's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, all right. So and I know a lot of people have seen, the movie Sully that was recently just released with Tom Hanks
Yep.
But maybe those that haven't, maybe they're aware, but they don't know exactly what happened. Kind of walk us through. The plane takes off,
Right.
and kind of walk us through what happened.
Nothing. Once again, nothing out of the ordinary. We take off. Didn't pay attention to the flight instructors like I normally didn't. So I'm back there in 15A. But about 60 to 70 seconds after we took off, is when you heard the big boom, or I call it an explosion because there was like a big pow on the plane. And candidly, I looked out the window and I saw fire coming out from beneath the left wing because I was in seat 15A. But I fly all the time. I flew over 100 times a year. I still do. Planes have multiple engines. I knew this one had at least 2 engines because I fly U.S. Airways back then all the time. So if you have another engine, no big deal. But I think to tell people, I think that's where everything started coming together for everybody because there was one explosion. And this doesn't get talked about a lot. And if you saw the movie Sully, it actually was very accurate on this. It was one explosion. It wasn't a boom, boom. So when the birds hit, they hit at the exact same time. And I tell people, if it would have been boom, boom, I think people then would have been freaking out. People started losing it mentally. But since people only heard one explosion, everybody thought another engine. We're banking, going back to the airport. So I think that was part of the saving grace of that day is it was one explosion. And, I speak at the plane all the time. There's somewhere between 20 and 25 of those big Canadian geese at the plane at one time. So it never happened before in the history of aviation. But when that happened, we started banking. I said, okay, he's going back to the airport. But then as we found out, I knew, and we found out in the movie, of course, he was actually banking going down the Hudson River. And as he was gliding the plane, it was so quiet on the plane because he had no engines. He had nothing. He had no power. So people didn't lose it. So they were quiet. The plane was quiet. It was like eerie, man, just like zzz, like a real eerie nothing until he crossed over the George Washington Bridge. And he doesn't get enough credit for that because he cleared the bridge by roughly, Josh, about 400 feet.
Wow.
And the bridge, the George Washington Bridge is roughly 600 feet up. So at that point, he was somewhere between 1,000, 900,000 feet roughly at that point, descending. And he only cleared the bridge by 400 feet. So when we crossed the bridge, he hasn't said anything yet. No one knows what's going on except he and Captain Skiles. And I looked out down the window, and people's heads were looking up at us as we were crossing over, and you could actually see people's faces in their windows. That's how close we were. So at that point is when I knew, man, something's not right. he's descending over a bridge, and all I could see is water in front of me.
Yeah, great. So then, at what point does I know at this point, like you said, people are still pretty calm. At what point does panic set in? Inside that plane, like what was it? Just kind of walk us through that. I don't know how to exactly phrase it, but because I got to imagine it's well before you hit the water.
Well, that's one of the other things that I tell people the backstory is probably more interesting than the real story because as soon as he said those words, brace for impact, this is your captain, brace for impact, that's the only thing he said is when people knew that this is probably not going to be a really good outcome. But no one lost it. I think everybody in that plane was really got internalized, and he gives credit. After I think about this, it makes sense because if you think of the business situation, and I got my own little business now, and I appreciate this, is he thought the passenger makeup of that plane really determined that outcome. where, him getting over the bridge and getting it down, he gets all the credit. But the passenger makeup of the plane was roughly 90 to 95% were business people like me and people who fly out of New York, bankers, financial people. So you have roughly anywhere from 10 to 5% of those people were older people or children. So the people who are business people were really, really calm, because I think everybody was thinking that I'm either not going to make it, or I better have a plan to get out of this plane. That's why there wasn't any panic on the plane going down. And now that he explained that to all of us, I think that's exactly what happened. That the reason there was no panic on the plane was the passenger makeup, because he likens it. And I think if you look at this from from a different perspective, if you're taking the same flight, let's say you take the same flight out of Orlando, Florida, and he does the same thing, right? You lose the engines, you're going down to the lake. What kind of people are coming out of Orlando, Florida? People going to Disney World, right? Universal, families, kids, and they're freaking out. So the passenger makeup of the plane, I think that's a distinction. So I tell businesses, Josh, it's like one of the most takeaways for me is on your team, on your business, you better make sure you have the right people in the right seats on your team, because they can make the whole difference in how your business is going to go, just like it is that day on the plane.
Yeah, love it. Couldn't agree more. So then, all right, so the plane crashes into the river, or not. Yep. I mean, that all takes place. And our minds are built, like our bodies, our minds are built for survival. So when people in those moments, right, a lot of times it's that fight or flight, right? Like you're thinking about your own safety, and it doesn't mean that somebody's a bad person, right? It's just right. how we're wired. It's what takes over, right? But you went into a different state. Right? Instead of just jumping off, worrying about yourself, trying to survive, which is how our bodies and brains are wired, you go into a different state. Right? Like what clicked at that moment? Was it something that you just didn't even think about and reflect about till after it just naturally happened?
Well, I think some of that we talked about at the beginning, a little bit of the training that I had. Part of the training that I had, and I actually talk and teach about, is state management, right? How to manage your mind, right? And get to the appropriate state for the situation. So having that background and having to do that with Tony, because I was head of security. And when you're head of security, especially for a celebrity like that, you got to maintain your state at all times. I mean, you can't be losing it, right? You got to, and because you're basically mirroring him. So managing my state was a big factor of that. So I didn't lose it because I was focused on, okay, where do I need to be now? How do I get out of this plane? Because Josh, candidly, my initial thought was get to the aisle, get up and get out. So it wasn't staying behind. But when I got to the aisle, it was my turn to go. All of a sudden I heard something in my head. It was my mom, who had passed away in 1997. And what she told me when I was a kid popped into my head. And it was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And the great thing about my mom, Josh, is she never really told us what to do. She would make us make choices, which was a great learning experience for me. You had to make a choice. Hopefully you made the right choice, but it was my choice. I could have gone very easily. But I decided, I grew up in an environment of sports and athletics and Boy Scouts and teams where every guy had everybody's back. Everybody had each other's backs. And that's why I still grew up, is like you had your team's back. So that's when I went towards the back of the plane, because at that moment, Josh, I knew I was alive, but I didn't know anybody in the back was going on. Right. So I went towards the back as they were going up, because people were climbing over the seats to get out. I was going towards the back. And when I got to the back, people started to move, but there was this one elderly lady, and you might have seen her depicted in the movie Sully. That's a lady who played that lady who didn't want to move. She was in a wheelchair. She didn't want to. She wanted a wheelchair. And it was like a little bit of a chaotic situation. And I give these two ladies credit, because two ladies were right in front of me, behind her. It's like, let's go, ladies, move. And they started picking her up and moving her down the aisle. And I started following them. And that's how I became the last passenger out of the plane. So they were moving her towards the front of the plane. First light I saw was on the right side of 10F. So I started diving out that door. But when I got there was no room on that wing of the boat for me. They were already filled up. So the first picture that were released on Good Morning America, and this is how I found this out, was me hanging out of the plane, holding on to the lifeboat. And that's why I was in a plane 7 minutes waist deep in 36-degree water, because there was no room on the wing or the boat for me.
Yeah. Wow. So then, all right. So your last passenger on the plane, by choice, right? By making, you know, that decision to do the right thing in that moment. Kind of walk us through like what the reflection that happened after that. Like, I got to imagine that just like really woke you up in life. You know, I mean, it sounds like you were doing some amazing things and having big success, you know, but you did pivot afterwards, you know, right? So I'm sure you went through a deep wake up moment that you hear from, you know, like cancer survivors that go through something similar. And that's like, what was that reflection process afterwards? You know, what were you going through internally?
Great question. I'll give you go back and then we'll give you that answer, because the last moment, which I don't talk about a lot because I don't get asked about a lot, that last moment from the time he crossed the bridge to the time of impact on the river is it. You know, I had got total clarity in my head because the movie of my life passed before my eyes. I was seeing things with such clarity in my life that from when I was a kid in high school and playing football and marrying and all this stuff, I had clarity of my mission. So when I got done and got out and started thinking back about what really happened, you know, what happened that day, one of the things I realized is this: I was sort of modeling my pathway of my father. And my father was a great man, but my father would travel 3 to 4 days a week. He was never home for his kids. He made a lot of money. You know, we were never hurting financially, but he was never there. And I was like, this is what I'm pattern. This is my pattern right now, because I'm always gone. We're making lots of money. So the big revelation I had is, you know what? I've got to readjust my priorities. Where, you know, I would always schedule my business stuff, and then, you know, I'll fit my family stuff in. I flipped it 180 degrees. Like, you know, I'll do my family stuff first and fit business in. And my company didn't like that a lot. But you know what? I had to do what's right for me, because you know what? I realized my kids are growing. I already had a daughter who didn't like me a lot because, you know, 16-year-old girls have sort of an attitude sometimes. So, you know, I was already having that. I'm like, I'm not going to waste these rest of these years with my kids and my family just so I can make Larry Ellison another $4 million next year. Yeah. That was the flip. Time prioritization was the biggest revelation. The second revelation I had after I looked back on it is I don't understand people's backstories of their lives. And you made a reference to that earlier. And if you don't mind, we'll expound on that for about 30 seconds. And one of the things that I realized is there was something that happened with, you know, you saw the lady in the movie who had the little child. I had interaction with her on the wing, and a very good interaction. But later I found out that her significant other was not anywhere close to her. And there were a lot of people mad at him. And, you know, at first I was questioning, is like, you know, how could this happen, right? I mean, you have a lady with 2 babies, right? And you're someplace else. But then all of a sudden I started figuring out, I don't know this guy's backstory. And when I found out later, he is deathly afraid of planes, deathly afraid of water. And he sort of freaked out a little bit and just went ahead. You know, and I said, okay, if I start judging people, because I would look back, Josh, I'm probably pretty judgmental. I probably quick snap judgments on people. So maybe if I step back to sort of understand that person's backstory, maybe I have a better appreciation for them and helping them, or understanding why they make the decisions they do, which was a great learning experience for me, because I had to step back, change my worldview, and it helped me in sales and everything I do, because now I don't make rash judgments. I wanted to get to know people. Like you were talking about, I want to know you before you got on here today with me. Yeah. I want to know a little bit about your background. So it gave me that perspective of my worldview. So those 2 things were the biggest revelations that I had.
So, you know, going through this experience, right, and having those revelations and like how quickly, right, now that this has happened, and I'm sure that, you know, for, I don't know what the transition period is, where you're probably still elements of shock going on, but how quickly do you start taking action on these new pivots, you know, with this new clarity that you have?
Well, I still had a job, and the first point that it started making me think about this was the next day when I came back to Charlotte, and my wife didn't want me to drive home from the airport, which was probably a better call than I made, but I had my car, so she said I had 2 of my kids with me. So I stopped by my office where I worked, because I hadn't heard from them, Josh. No one called me. No one called my wife. I didn't even know that they knew that I was on the plane, but I was on every TV show in the world. So it's like, you know, I was hoping they knew. But I walked in the office, and my manager, not my vice president, but my manager came and said, "You're going to Michigan next week, right?" In front of my kids. And my kids were looking at me like, "Dad, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll go." And I started realizing, Josh, you know what? I got to make this, I got to move. I got to do something because all of a sudden I'm just a number. They would have put somebody else's butt in that seat next week and just would have gone on with business. And if I would have died. So that was the moment I started making the pivot, but I had to get a game plan on how to make the pivot. And I started speaking a little bit here, I was speaking a little bit there, and all of a sudden that started taking off. And about 4 years later, my wife gave me permission to go ahead and to start my own little company and take the plunge. And that pivot started that next day when my manager asked me that question. Now, I think it was meant to be because that's what I'm supposed to be doing in my life, going out and impacting people's lives.
Yeah, I can't imagine like the day after this happens, not coming up to you, hey, are you okay? Is there anything we can do to support?
Right.
Right? Do you need to spend some time with your family? That being the first thing out of their mouth, like I don't know if I would have like not been able to like punch the dude. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you know what? I was in shock because I just got back and I had any clothes. I had sweats on, and my kid. I was still in shock when I said it. But Josh, what really came to light on that, I'll tell you, it took me about 5-6 months after that. I was in New York doing some media with some other passengers. And I was sitting there talking to one of them, and I asked him, I said, well, how did your company take care of you? And he said, well, my company flew the company plane up, took us home, and gave me a couple of weeks of paid time off. And I talked to a lady in Atlanta. She goes, well, the CEO flew his private plane up, gave me a month time off with paid leave, just to so I could get back into the thing. And they asked me, I said, I had to go. I went back to work that next week because my company asked me to fly the next week. And that's all I was sitting there looking at me. He's like, really? I'm like, I was saying, well, maybe I'm not in the right place because the other companies really took care of their associates, just like you said, right? Mm-hmm. And they took care of them. And here I am flying to Michigan to make somebody else some money after I almost died.
Yeah, crazy. I
had my priorities. It goes back. My priorities were whacked, right?
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. So on the you provided us with some interview questions here, and one of them I'm really curious about your perspective on, which is in regards to PTSD. Right? When people experience something like this, or most people think of PTSD for soldiers when they're coming home, and how do you overcome that when you go through something like this? Because people that haven't experienced, I've never have, nothing close, right? Like I've been like an offender bidder. That's like probably the worst. So I can't even fathom what's that like. Like, how do you overcome that and not let those things set in so deeply to hinder you? So you can go out there and then create that life that you wanted, like you've done after having those reflections.
Well, thanks for asking that question, because as we know now in the movie, and we knew because we were going through it, the Captain Sullivan had PTSD after the plane crash, and there's a lot of different stages of it. But, I tell people, people kept telling me, Josh, I need therapy and I would have PTSD and, just sort of chill out, right? But I didn't. And I kept saying, why not me? What's the difference with me and everybody else? And I started talking to other people who've been through a traumatic life event. And they did go through PTSD. So I'm starting to find a difference. And it goes back to really three things. This is what my TED Talk was about post-traumatic growth syndrome. How do you grow from a traumatic life event where so many people get PTSD? First thing is I start processing it differently. And what do you mean by that? Well, I'll give you an example. There's some people on the plane that went through PTSD that still don't fly, lost their jobs, lost their families, and they got hatred in their heart. And they said, they asked me, well, how'd you do it? How could you do this? Because we went down through a plane crash. I'm like, because I went out and started processing. I started talking about it. I got out of my body. So physically, I started getting out of my body, telling people about it. Second thing, we talk about state management and knowing how to manage your mind. And so in the way I managed my mind through this was I asked myself different questions. It's called the internal dialogue. Right? There's physiology, internal dialogue, and focus. Mine was internal dialogue, and the question I kept asking myself was, how can I add even more value and enjoy the process? And enjoying the process to me was the kicker in there, because I tell people, how many people go to work every day, hate their jobs? They're adding value, they're making money, but they hate their jobs. How could I do that, right? But I enjoy the process. So by speaking and processing, I did that. And the third thing, which is probably the most important, which I love to talk about, is the associating a different meaning. The meaning equals your emotion of your life, and emotion is your life. And that's what Tony taught me that years ago. And I reframed that meaning, where some people said it's a tragedy. I lost my job. I lost my family. Where this is a blessing, and how can I add value? all of a sudden, those three things I did, I started growing. And that's what I talk about now and help people who've been through a PTSD or depressed, traumatic life experience or depressing situation. A lot of military, a lot of first responders, and especially right now, law enforcement. I talk to a lot of sheriffs primarily because a lot of them are going through challenges right now with this topic.
Yeah. And it's like you said, with those 3 points, it's just the lens that you choose to look at it, right? Like somebody can, life can be shitty or life can be epic in an instantaneous moment based on the lens that you look at it. And you just have this unique ability to be able to look out of the right lens to not be affected, but use these things to grow and improve your life.
Questions, right? Ask myself different questions other people ask themselves. And that, I learned that from Tony years ago. So started talking this whole discussions about those kind of things. But what did I have in the past that helped me? That was one of the things. How can I ask myself a more empowering question so I can reframe it and then put something positive out of a negative situation?
Yeah. So then, with Tony, because I know you worked head of security for him for 10 years. But you think like head of security, you're I don't know, you're not being mentored by him to be one of his coaches, right?
Right.
But what did that look like? Right? I'm just kind of curious. What type of training did you go through to again adopt that mindset?
Well, one of the great things is, I went through all the seminars, right? So I was learning, but I didn't master anything at that point. But when he asked me to be on his security team, the first thing was I was back in his green room. I basically watched his door for 1 week. That's all I did. So, but I'm a visual learner. So I was watching him at all times, right? How did he interact with people? How did he get this stuff? So I started learning that way. I didn't have any formal training, but then he put me on stage with him, and having his back. It's like in football, being the left guard right behind the quarterback. You had the guy's back. I was watching again, right? So, and then traveling with him. So now I'm one-on-one with Tony Robbins, traveling with him, right? And I tell people what's more important, the people that he hung with. You get around some of these people he hangs with are unbelievable people. And now you're talking and learning from them. So by just assimilating all these things that being around him, because one of the things he talks about, which is totally true, and one of the things I'm teaching now is proximity is power. If you want to get anything, if you want to lose weight, find somebody who's a master at losing weight and model what they've done, right? All I did was model the things that he taught and mastered those techniques and be able to be a security. Because one of the things about being a security with Tony, I could not carry a firearm. He wanted me and all my team to use the techniques he taught to be able to reframe people to, refocus them on what else they could be doing instead of being there. So that's how we did it. So I think proximity was power with me and being a visual learner because things move really quick in that environment.
Yeah. Love it. So then, you mentioned asking yourself different questions in those moments, right? So, and most people probably, I shouldn't say probably, most people won't experience something like you went through. But can you give us some samples of just like maybe 2 or 3 questions? Maybe somebody's just having a horrible day at work. Maybe their boss just laid into them, or maybe they're, they just got a big fight in their marriage or whatever. Like what are some reframing questions that you coach your clients and others on that can help people in daily life reframe their thought processes and look at that right lens?
Well, I'll give you a personal example, which once I've reframed this, it changed my relationship with my wife. I've been married 30 years now, Josh, but at the 15-year mark, I don't know if anybody's listening to ever had this, but about the halfway point, halftime, where you're at, things may not go as well as you planned, right? Things get a little rocky in a relationship. And all of a sudden, like we were having that situation and things weren't going well. And the way I reframed it and the questions I started asking myself, and I tell my people I work with this, I said, when you get to that point, you just sort of change the lens, like you said, it's like, okay, my wife is a auditory learner, an auditory communicator. I'm a visual communicator, and we're clashing. I said, okay, how can I be in her modality so I can communicate in a more effective way? And that was the question I kept asking myself. And all of a sudden I had to turn myself into an auditory communicator, which means I would sit there and listen for 30 minutes while she didn't take a breath, and talk and just listen instead of jumping and say, I got it. Because a visual communicator, Josh, is like we're talking now. We're talking fast. Like, okay, I got it. You don't need to give me 30 minutes of discussion. I got it. Well, auditory communicators don't like that. So by asking that question, right, I just reframe, okay, how can I be in that person's world, that realm? That's one of the biggest reframing questions I use all the time when I meet people on the road, right? I'll go up, I'll get interviewed by somebody, or like yesterday I was in Virginia doing 3 talks, 3 totally different audiences. I had to put myself in their realm, right? So how can I put myself in their realm to be a more effective communicator is something I reframe all the time.
Yeah, love it. So it sounds to me based on what the example that you just gave, and then also what you were talking about with Tony not being able to carry firearms and having to reframe their mindset. It sounds like you've done an amazing job at learning how to become into an empathetic state. Right. Right. Like you said earlier too, not judging people, trying to really know their backstory and yep. And there's a big difference between empathy and sympathy, right? Would you say that that's true, that it really boils down to learning to be extremely empathetic?
I think it's a major part of it. That's one of the biggest changes I had to make. You're exactly right. There's a big difference. There's two little letters, sympathy and empathy, right? Where I could be very sympathetic to a lot of people, and then I'm not serving my mission, my purpose. But I could be empathetic with anybody and basically put myself in their seat, but help them get their outcome in a different way. And I think that's a great way to look at it, because I've really never looked at it that way, but you're exactly right. Once you can be more empathetic, understand that person's world. And one of the things Tony teaches, right, is when you're in negotiations, and he shows us he does a visual show on stage when he starts talking to somebody, and then all of a sudden turns it around, he's side by side with them. And all of a sudden, he's in a different world with them. Is visually that gave me the power to say, I got to be side by side with people instead of going directionally and attacking people all the time. And so being empathetic, but not giving in, not being sympathetic, but saying, you know what, I understand where you're coming from. And let's figure this thing out maybe in a different way that serves both of our patterns. And we just talk about breaking people's patterns, and that's what happened on the plane that day. Likewise, I helped people break patterns so they could get their outcome and I could get my outcome. And I had one very visual one that I did that got a lot of notoriety, but all I did was break somebody's pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. So I recently had the lead international FBI hostage negotiator for 24 years on the show. And we talked a lot about empathy and sympathy and how you've got to be brilliant at negotiations, how you have to learn to operate from an empathetic state. And a lot of people use empathy and sympathy. They think it's the same thing. And the analogy he gave is if somebody's in quicksand, right? Sympathy is, I'm going to jump in there and try to save you. And then we both sink in the quicksand together and die. Empathy is, hey, that sucks. I feel bad that you're in that situation. Here, let me go get you a rope. And that way you can pull yourself out, right? But yeah. But I love that you brought up that because there is a difference, just like you stated. So, all right. So then, at what point after all of this did you? Did you write the book? Like, did the book happen? Because you still felt like was this a way of not letting the PTSD set in by just talking about it so openly, and you wanted to impact others' lives by going through your experiences? Is that ultimately what led the book? What did lead to the book?
So I contributed to the first book called Brace for Impact. And basically I wrote a chapter. So I wanted to get my story out, but that was that. But what really happened, Josh, and here's the backstory, was that, we had a couple of neighbors down the street, and they were 2 older ladies. And if you ever has a neighbor, they call, you're going to help them out, right? Especially older ladies, right? So they call me, one day they call and say, can you help us set up our TV? Well, of course, I'll come down and set up a TV, right? I get done. We're talking about 2 older ladies now, right? So they get done. We can give you want some cookies and milk? Well, of course, I'm not going to turn down cookies and milk, right? So as I'm sitting there, right, as they're getting the cookies and milk, I'm flipping through these books on their table there, and I started noticing pictures. And I asked her, I said, where are these pictures from? She goes, well, we were in those. They were in a concentration camp in World War II. And they survived, and then they showed me their forearms with their numbers. And I'm like, you got to record this. You have to. They were 80-some years old then, right? You have to record. She said, no, we don't want to talk about it. So fast forward a few months, my former assistant said, you need to record this for your grandkids because you may not be around for them. You need to have this in your voice for them to hear. So we spent about 9 hours recording moment by moment of that day, everything. I mean, every detail from that day and the day after. And we're like, we got a book. Well, what are we going to do with it? So I was talking to somebody and I just made a reference, Josh. I said, you know what? One thing I realized by recording all this is that every moment of my life mattered. All those moments came and culminated in that one moment in time. And all of a sudden we're like, wow, that's the book. We can write a book not only telling the story, but all these lessons from that day and all these moments in my life that sort of led up to how I was more aware and the teamwork and leadership and persistence. And that's how the book came together, all because I went down and fixed 2 older ladies' TVs, and they gave me the idea that I need to record my story. And this is a record of my story for my grandkids.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the title "Moments Matter." You know, because so often in life, like maybe we're going through a painful situation, and when you're going through it, man, it sucks, and it's easy to have that victimhood mindset set in of "oh, poor me," you know. But once you overcome that, you come out bigger, stronger, and those painful situations become an asset, and you realize later in life that moment had to happen. But again, most people don't operate out of that lens of that. So I love it, man. So then, what, I mean, how did the speaking start, right? I mean, was it, because I know after this event, I mean, you're interviewed on every single, show out there. But that's different than going out there and speaking to crowds all over the planet to inspire them to step into their own greatness, right? I mean, did that start after the book and did the book lead to that, or is that something that you were doing before?
I was doing it before, and what happened was, the following Sunday, my church asked me to speak the following Sunday. So I did, you're at church, right? But, I thought it was supposed to be for the men's group for about 50 old guys, right? Just, I tell eating pancakes, 50 old guys, I got it, no big deal. But all of a sudden, they opened it up to the entire community, and 500-600 people showed up, and they ran out of pancakes. So I can tell you, I got hungry, angry Methodist on my hands. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I speak, and then this older lady came up to me and said, I was questioning if there's a God. I don't believe in miracles, but your physical evidence there's a God. Wow. And sort of looked me in the eye, and I was like, wow, I impacted somebody's life, right? At least that one lady before she goes wherever she's going. So I said, you know what, maybe speaking is a good way to get it out. Start processing this, let's get it out. So I spoke around churches, but what was my real breakthrough was when I spoke. I was invited to speak in Washington, D.C. for the American Red Cross at their annual event. And Justice Anthony Kennedy was the sponsor at the Supreme Court when I spoke. And we raised over $6 million that night for the Red Cross. And I helped be speaking there. And that was where my breakthrough was like, you know what? I just helped raise close to $6 million by speaking. Where else can I impact people's lives? And that's what took me off speaking, and now I've spoken over 850 plus times around the world, all different venues, all different places, all different types of people. And it's my goal every day, Josh, is to impact one person's life by speaking. And if I do that, I've accomplished my goal when I show up. So that's what's happened.
Yeah, I got to imagine the fulfillment that comes from that, right? That I mean, so many people are, when they're chasing their careers, like you talked about, is how many people are making great money but hate their job. And the stat is something like 80% of Americans are absolutely miserable at their workplace. And I got to imagine doing what you do now, the fulfillment that it brings due to that impact is just insane.
It's not a job to me now. Before I had to go to work 50, 60 hours a week. Now it's like, I can't wait to go out and impact somebody's life. Right. And if I do that, then, I have a piece in I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm fulfilling the mission on this earth to do. And I think that's why I try to give people the bigger picture. One of my goals is to help people understand, find your mission, because, one of the things Tony would tell me every time I pick him up at the helipad or the airport, and first we get in the car and I'm driving him to the hotel, and he say, "Hey, are you still working for that guy?" And I was making up excuses why, right? And after so many times, he calls BS on most of it, right? He sort of holds you to account. So, but after the plane crash, he's the guy who called me in the hospital that night. So afterward, he was coaching me on how to get out, do this. He said, I'll give you coaching if you want it, on how to really break out and become your own person, become your own business, and love what you're doing. And he gave me the coaching, right after the next several weeks on how to do this. And it took me a little while, of course, because when you're making $250,000+ a year. That's pretty good money, right? And all of a sudden your wife's looking at you, you're going to do what? You're going to go out and speak and you're going to make what? Right?
Yeah.
So it was the biggest sales job of my life was that, getting my wife to buy into that, right? I could sell software every day. Getting my wife to turn around was the big sell of my life.
Yeah, love it, man. So speaking of that transition moment, because, I mean, and we have a lot of listeners too that are in the corporate space, but they know they have a passion, an obsession, a dream of becoming an entrepreneur. They know they want to do more, but man, it is such a scary process. They got the security, they got the safety. A lot of times those closest to us end up criticizing us in those moments. Like, what are you doing? Whatever. I had a guy the other day that's like, if you post on Facebook that you got a new job, people are like, oh, congrats. And everybody applauds for you. If you post on Facebook, hey, I started a new business, like you get a call from your mother asking, are you okay? Right? Exactly. It's a different world out there. How did you mentally, internally go through that process? Because holy crap, it is scary. And so many people allow that fear to shut them down. They never take action on it. Then on their deathbed, they have a massive regret of not doing it.
Well, that's a great question, because I work with a firm called Halftime out of Dallas. It's exactly about this subject right here, is when you get that fulfillment point in your job, you're not making any stuff and you want to get out, but how do you get out? Right? Well, the first thing is you really got to internalize what is your mission, to get clarity on your mission. And that's what I was doing this whole time. But one of the things that I learned from Tony, and he told me this straight up, when you're going to do it, you burn the boats. You're not going back. Once you got to do it, you make the commitment and you're all in. But you still got to make money, right? You still got to put that. So you have to have the mindset. And the way I did that is I built my little network of people who I could call, who've been through the same thing that I went through, moving from corporate to my own little company or whatever I was going to do, and just get constant coaching from them. And I leaned on a lot of different people. But I was still fearful on how to do it, right? Because, my wife lives in the world of certainty. Her worldview is certainty. Give me certainty and she's fine. This is total uncertainty. So, the person who has the most certainty at uncertain times becomes the leader. That's one of my mindset. So I had to give myself certainty, to give other people certainty, but I kept coaching and using the models that I had out there. That's the first thing that I did. Now what I do to help people is I work with an organization in Atlanta. We call it The Perfect Plan Today, with a guy by the name of Dominique Wilkins, who's in the NBA, and a couple other people, teaching these strategies on how to do this. How does somebody move from, top sales producer or top VP in a company or anybody to doing their own thing? And so I've teamed up with Dominique and two other people. One's called Zing Shaw, who she's the first diversity VP of the NBA. She works with these guys in the NBA who don't know how to figure this stuff out. And so we put together this program to teach people these strategies on how to move with a mindset from being in that corporate world or that company world to living your own life at that 1% level. And I've learned so much from them likewise.
Yeah, love it. So it sounds like the advice would be like Napoleon Hill talks about this in Think and Grow Rich. Like get your, you got a board of advisors for a company, but you got, your board of advisors, board of directors in your own personal life. Right. So you built that board, if you will. But then you had to get sold on yourself. You had to deliver that confidence and like in debate, right? It's not who's most right. It's who's most certain that wins. And that was that internal battle that you had to win, which you did before you made that leap.
Yep, and exactly right. And I started, one of the people I loved to listen to when I was growing in sales is Zig Ziglar. Yeah. And I was listening to Zig and it's like, how did Zig start, right? Because he moved from that world to being the world-class speaker that he was. And one of the strategies he used, I said, I'm going to employ, and I did, was the first 50 to 75 talks that I did outside, I didn't take a dime for it because I could perfect my technique, which once you perfect, it's called the success cycle, right? I teach the success cycle. Once you do that, you get some results, you get certainty, and all of a sudden it starts over again, right? You get more certainty, and all of a sudden 50, 75 times you got it down. When you go on stage or people call you, I can deliver. And all of a sudden you give that certainty to people. People are willing to pay you money to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought that up because we've had numerous professional speakers, that get paid like you did to go out there and speak on stages. And, I'll get reached out on the podcast of, like where to go start. And I'm not a professional speaker, so I can't always speak to it, but it just seems like so many people, they just want to get paid. It's like, yeah, I want to become a professional speaker, but they're not willing to go out there and invest 100 speeches or 75 speeches like you did to master their craft, get their name out there and all of that. So I love that you brought that up. And those that are wanting to get to that place, right? That hey, I've got a message. I know I can go out there and impact. I want to become a professional speaker. Once you deliver those 75 speeches, right? Kind of how do you transition into monetizing on that, right? Because I got to assume like initially you can't be greedy with it. You kind of take what you can get. I don't know, but kind of walk us through some suggestions there.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I really appreciate it, because one of the things I learned when playing sports coach, you got to earn the right for that position. You got to put your time in. I don't care what you do in life, whether you're in sales, you're in sports, whether you're doing podcasting. There's some top podcasters right now out there, right, that have earned the right to be that position. So I felt I had to earn the right. But once I felt certain on that, I got approached because somebody heard me. An agent heard me. This is how I started monetizing it. So I did maybe 50, 60 plus talks, right, for free, out of my own pocket, expenses maybe only, but that's it. And I had an agent who saw me speak in the Washington, D.C. area. And he came up to me and said, "You're really good. I'd like to sign you." I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He says, "That means you get paid for doing this from now on." I'm like, "Okay, now we're talking." But she said, "But you're not going to get the $25,000 to $100,000 where everybody thinks they should be. Everybody thinks they should be getting $10,000, $20,000 for a time. Well, you haven't earned that right yet." So I started doing these $1,000, $2,500 engagements once again to get comfort and certainty that I could deliver at that level, which then all of a sudden starts growing, right? And then you have those watershed moments. One of the watershed moments, as you see in the background, is the movie Sully. Sully came out, right? And all of a sudden, I'm in the movie. The story's told, and all of a sudden, I've been doing this now for 6, 7 years. I've got credibility. Then you start earning more and more and start monetizing it in a different way, right? So you have to earn the right to ask for money. For me, it took me, like I said, about the 60 to 70 mark is when that guy heard me speak and offered me the first money. And I took it. My first gig was $1,000. Yeah. And I thought that I was banking it, right? I was banking it. All I got to do is 20 times a month and I'll be great. It's hard to get 20 times because you have a lot of speakers out there. Yeah. So now you got to figure out the game plans, right, on how you're going to do it. But that's how I started monetizing it now. I do it by coaching and my some of the other things that I do, my books. So you just start growing. But the first thing is you got to earn the right. And hopefully somebody hears you who has some influence someplace. And that's what happened to me. And that happens to a lot of people I talk to. Because I just had a lady call me today, Josh. She's in Dallas. Asked me to talk to her. How can I get paid $5,000 right now to get paid? I said, "Have you ever spoken before?" "No." So the next talk I'm going to tell you is you got to earn the right. And I'll teach you on how to earn the right. But you got to put the time in, right? Like The Apprentice. Like we're pumping weight, right? Everybody wants to have those nice cuts. Yeah, but it doesn't. It takes you 2 to 3 years to get those cuts because there's steps you have to take to get to that point.
Yep. Love it. So then, I know that this necessarily wasn't the reason that you wrote the book, right? You wrote the book to share your story, have impact, and I don't know if these thoughts were going on or not. But what do you think the power is for somebody that does want to get into public speaking of being published, right? Because it does give you instant credibility.
That's exactly what, because people kept telling me I need my own book because I was a part of the book Brace for Impact, which was nice and I could market it. But people kept telling me to have real credibility, you need to have your own book. Right. So that's what, as we were putting this together, that was the sort of a thought process in the back of the head is maybe if I get this out, I'll have credibility. And what happened was I've been doing media tours and having the book, right, around the book, which gave me credibility and visibility that, you know what, this guy actually is taking that step. It's like something that my first employer told me, Josh. And it was interesting because, you go through college, right? You're doing all the steps, you go through college, and all this. And all of a sudden you get a job. And then then one of the things I asked him, "Why did you hire me?" He goes, "Well, the reason, being a college graduate, all that means to me is you've accomplished something." He said, "I don't care if you had straight A's. I don't care if you got C's, but you accomplished it and you got a degree. You showed accomplishment." And all of a sudden I started thinking, that's the same thing with the book. All the book is give me credibility and show I've accomplished something that I can stick to it. So I tell people, if you really want to be one of these speakers who really start earning the money, like, Captain Sullenberger's got 3 books out now, right? He's doing a great job. It gives you credibility, but it shows that you can accomplish something and also share that in a way that with other people. It's like, you know what? I've written a book because I spent my time doing it, and this is my story.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said too, and it kind of gets comical, but people want that big payday, yep. Right there. They're like, oh man, Gary Vaynerchuk's getting $100,000 a speaking gig. I want $100,000. It's like, look at the hustle that dude put in, all the books, all the free content, all the a decade of
yep.
To get to that level. It's like everybody, everybody wants to be the beast until they got to do what the beast does. Right.
Right. Exactly right. Let's go outside, do some push-ups and sit-ups in 100-degree weather, do that effort that you get to, then you earn the right to be able to ask for it. You got to put that effort in, man, and the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, Tony Robbins of the world, those guys have put 20, 30 years into this thing. Now it's their payday,
Yep. Yep, love it. So then, okay, so I after the plane crash, right? You had that moment where it's like, hey, I'm living my life backwards. Family first, business second, right?
Yep.
But now, I mean, you're talking being on the road. You're doing 200 gigs speaking events a year, right? So, but then you got travel time in with that, and so I'm sure that you're traveling as much, if not more, than maybe you were back in the corporate space. But how have you shifted that to be successful with putting family first, focusing on those relationships, but still chasing your passion? Because I think that's important. I hear a lot of people that say, "Oh, my why's my kids," right? I'm like, and that's great. Right. But that should be like the given. Like, you're going to have kids, take care of your kids, create out great opportunities. You should also have your own personal purpose or dreams for your own life. So how have you successfully been able to do both without sacrificing them?
Well, that's great, because I mentioned the first thing I do, though, before I schedule anything, is I find out if my family has anything going on. Because candidly, I've turned down some engagements recently because I've had a family. They're like, tomorrow I'm taking my daughter to college. And my third daughter, it's my number 3. So I've been through it a couple of times. I'm pretty good at it by now. But, I had people tomorrow that wanted me to do a big webinar tomorrow for them. And I said, no, my daughter comes first. I'm going to college, right? I'll do it next week. So I first thing I do is I always schedule. I find out what my kids or my wife's out. Sometimes they're unavoidable. Stuff comes up. But, I've rationalized it to where I've done this so long, and my kids know that I'll be there for the big events. If I miss something right now, we might get through it. But that's the first thing that I do is look at the family schedule and then schedule around it. And it doesn't really budge too much unless it's not something like when I tell you one example that I did budge is when I was invited to be my Clint Eastwood's producer to be, come out and shoot for the movie Sully. Yeah. And he gave me 72 hours notice. That's it. And I had the whole week booked up. And I told my wife, because we had something to do, I said, listen, this is a once in a lifetime, right? So, but I tell people, look at your family stuff first. And now that the kids are getting older, I've got 2 of them out of the house. One's going to college and one in high school. It gets a lot easier now, right? A lot easier. But when they were all in elementary school and middle school, that's when I was giving time up. And I wish I had that time back, and I would have flipped the model then.
Yeah, and I've had mentors of mine telling me to do that for years, because I've got – my kids are 9, 7, and 4, right? And I've had mentors say, hey, pull out your yearly calendar, schedule your family events first, then schedule and work. And it's always been it's always fallen on deaf ears. But I'll tell you, this year I did it, right? So I booked out my calendar a year ahead. Right? Got the kids' school schedule, when their breaks were, if they have a day off school or 3-day weekend, like that's blocked off. It's that family time. Then I blocked in business, and it's not that I'm working even, less per se, but man, I don't know what it is, but the action I take is so much more inspired action compared to forced action, right? Just because I know I'm investing that time and I have that blocked off, and it just allows me to operate better while I'm at work too. Right. I mean, have you found that hold true for you?
Yeah, it's a mindset where I'm much more focused and much more effective in what I do, and I've set myself up with technology. Now that we have technology, it's easier to do it. Right now we're doing this, visually like this, where I don't have to get on a plane to go someplace. So I've also changed some of the ways I present, where now I do it, sort of virtually, where it makes a lot of sense. But yes, once I started doing that, it's helped me be much more effective and focused on what I'm doing, because I know that, I'm going to go into this high school football game on Friday night. I'm going to be home all day Friday. Today we're going to serve, right? And we're serving at the highest level. But tomorrow afternoon at 3:00, this thing's shut off. We're shutting it down. So, yeah.
Yeah, love it. So then, just out of curiosity, when you got into speaking, I mean, the number one fear out there for people is public speaking. Yep. Did you have that fear? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Well, the way I overcame it, I did have some. I presented in business all the time, but those are small groups, right? Maybe you have 10 people in a group, and that's pretty. But when all of a sudden you're in front of 1,000 people, right? And everybody's looking at you, it can get a little undaunting the first couple of times. So, I just went back to say, I kept telling myself, I know more about this than they do. I know more about this than they do. And I started delivering with certainty, even though I might have screwed up, and I did plenty of times. I got off sideways all over the place, right? But I knew that I said, if I come across with certainty, at least they'll think that I know what I'm talking about, which gave me once again more certainty to do it. It was as the success cycle just repeating itself. So I tell people, and at first I didn't look at anybody in the eyes. I had 3 points in the back that I would always look, right. That's what I was taught in public speaking. But after being with Tony for all those years, and I see how he just like digs right into somebody's eyes and just goes right at them, that's what I started doing. And it gave me, once again, a lot of certainty. It's like, I'm talking to you. Are you paying attention to me? And so what I do now, Josh, is it doesn't matter if I've got 100 people or 1,000 people. My goal is to look at everybody in the eye at least one time. Yeah. And that gives me, once again, takes the fear out of me, because now I'm making sure I'm connected with you. You're connected with me. We're in this thing together. And all of a sudden I've got that power and that certainty going for me.
Yep. Love it. And the cool thing today is, well, not just today. I mean, for it's been this way for a long time. But there's so many great organizations you can join, I mean, I didn't do it because of public speaking. I did it because I'm a hardcore introvert, right? Like I'm the guy, like in high school, I didn't even want to raise my hand because I didn't want to sound like an idiot and, or whatever. Right. So to even deliver presentations to my own employees, I could speak to them one-on-one, but if I got in a group of 5 of them, man, I'd shut down. So I joined Toastmasters for a year, not to become a polished speaker, but just to get used to getting in front of people and speaking. Right. And, and it sounds like you had some speaking coaches in training and, kind of shed some light on the importance of that, right?
Well, I think it's truly important. I'm actually speaking at Toastmasters in Florida coming up here in about 5 months. And I encourage people to do that. I've been approached by NSA, National Speakers Association, and Toastmasters. And I think that for people who have a fear and or are not accustomed to being in front of people, it's a perfect environment because you're not judged. Everybody's going to have their time in those situations, right? So their time's going to come, and they're there to help you. So I think I always encourage people, if you have a chance to speak at a Rotary, Chamber, Toastmasters, NSA, whatever it is, where you're around a smaller group of people who will not judge you for maybe your delivery, but maybe content but not delivery, I take it, because the more you do it, the more comfortable you get doing it. Toastmasters is a great organization. I can't wait to speak for them coming up next year in Florida.
And like you said earlier, you got to put in those reps, right? You put in those reps and now you get on stage in front of thousands and people, it's so effortless. People are like, oh, well, Dave's got this gift. Well, they didn't see you that first speech, right? You put in those reps, right?
See all those sit-ups I was doing, all those push-ups and pull-ups I was doing in the background, right?
Yeah.
That's what I tell these guys. This lady who's a tremendous bodybuilder that I'm talking with right now down in Texas. Actually, she's in South Padre Island. Hopefully she's okay today. But I looked at her body. I'm like, man, how did you get that? She goes, just reps every day, right? Reps every day. It doesn't happen overnight. You got to put the time in. Right? Everybody, every successful person, unless you're this guy in Massachusetts today that got the one ticket for $758 million, he lucked into it, right? That was his golden ticket, right? But I bet you he bought a lot more tickets before then. He put his reps on those tickets. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It doesn't happen usually the first time.
Yeah, it seems like people are chasing that magic pill, but the only magic pill that exists is consistency.
Effort. Effort and execution.
Yep. Love it. So then, I know that, you're again, 200 some speeches a year or maybe more, but it's a lot, right? So, but you also offer, coaching and, of course you got the book and other platforms. Kind of give us an idea for those that, maybe want to come hear you speak or maybe interested in talking to you further with some of your coaching programs. Like, what are some of the other things in addition to the coaching that you're involved in today? And also, where's the best place to go learn more about all of this stuff?
Well, thank you. So first, where they can catch me is DaveSandersonSpeaks.com. And if you want to hear me speak, my schedule's out there. And I encourage you, if you see that I'm coming to your town and you would like to hear not only that it's a story, but meet me personally, send me a message, ask me to be put on my personal guest list. And I do this all the time for people who do that. It would make the effort to go out on my website and say, you're going to be in Kansas City. I'd love to hear you speak. I'll put you on my personal guest list, be my guest there, and you'll be a front row seat. So the website's the first great place to do it. Second, of course, is Facebook at Dave Sanderson Speaks, and then LinkedIn, David Sanderson, and Twitter at Dave Sanderson too. But, right now, I would tell people, I do workshops. But one of the organizations, this program I'm working with Dominique, has really got my attention because it's called The Perfect Plan Today. And go to perfectplantoday.com. You can check us out. But, if you really want to be immersed of proximity with people who have attained that Hall of Fame status, that's like Dominique Wilkins, to be around it, understand these mindset, go to perfectplantoday.com, check it out, and and if you're interested, you can get some more information on it. But I also like to offer everybody here, if they would like a little bit more about some of the topics we talked about, text 797979, put brace for number 4 impact, and I'll send you a couple videos that you can hear about certainty and persistence, and you can hear it firsthand about how this is done, and that way you'll learn a little bit more how to do it one-off and what I do in my coaching and workshops.
Yeah, love it. So you got a lot going on, right? Do you find yourself being more passionate? One of the paths, I know the plan for the perfect day, you're really passionate about speaking, obviously. I mean, do you find yourself kind of veering toward more one direction that you have a little bit more passion for than the other? Or is it just, all of them are just bringing so much fulfillment that you just want to continue with all of it long term?
I want to continue with, right now I'm continuing with all of it. I haven't hit any burnout stage whatsoever, but what I'm finding is I hit different venues, different people with different areas. Well, right now, one of the things I'm passionate about, and I'll give credit to my kids. This gives 100% to my kids when they told me, Dad, you got to get on Instagram because you're not talking to anybody that age. So all of a sudden I started doing this Instagram thing, right? And I'm just trying to figure this thing out. But all of a sudden, Josh, I am talking to millennials and younger people who follow that, who are now interacting with me. And they can get this, like I did. When I was 24, 25 years old, I had my first mentor. His name was Bill. And he was 60 years old. And he took me under his wing. Maybe I could find a couple millennials out there who want to be a speaker or want to learn some of these things that can be the next Dave or next Tony or next, Zig Ziglar, right? Just by using a different mechanism. And right now, Instagram is the thing I'm doing and connecting with folks from 20 years old, 20, 30 years old, which is a brand new thing for me. It's opened my eyes to what I've been missing out on how to help the younger crowd.
Yep. Love it. So you spoke about burnout and not being, you've been at this for a long time, hustling hard now, and you haven't experienced burnout. Based on your experience now between, really operating the two different worlds, the corporate space where burnout probably happened consistently compared to what you're doing now, because the amount of action and hustle hasn't changed, right? But the fact that now you're operating in a congruent place with your true mission, do you think burnout exists in those that are chasing their mission, or does burnout really exist for those that are having to take that massive action, that's non-congruent with what they really want to do?
That is, you have said it perfectly, and you used the word that I use, congruent, because once you're congruent with you understand your mission and you become congruent with that mission and live that. I don't know if you can ever burn out. I think you may adjust and evolve like I have, where some of the different messaging, right, just to keep yourself fresh. Like now I talk about post-traumatic growth syndrome, where I never talked about that 3 years ago. But when I was in the corporate world, just like you said, every year, man, I'll tell you, June, May, June come around, I couldn't even think straight because I hated what I was doing. And the problem is you're making so much money. Right. So I tell people, it's like, once the people who understand their mission, why do you think Tony Robbins has been doing this 30 some years at that level?
Yeah.
It's because he has a mission, right? He doesn't get burned out. He takes fresher. He goes to Fiji and relaxes. Then he's back at it. So you take that pit stop, right? You go into the pit stop, get greased up a little bit, right? Put you back out on the road. And I think that's exactly what happens when you understand and live and being congruent with your mission. Love the terminology because that's exactly what I use.
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. So, yeah, because I mean, I'll get criticized pretty heavily for my work ethic, and I own or I'm a partial owner, co-owner in 8 different companies, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of work, but it never feels like work. People are, man, it's almost more difficult to take a break. I mean, I agree on taking breaks and vacations because, you got to force yourself to recharge those batteries, but that's more painful going through that recharge state than it is doing that grind.
Well, look, you get to speak to so many unique and exciting people. In your position right now, what you're doing, I would be excited every day because you know what? I know what this dude's going to say. I know what this lady's going to say, right? And it's refreshing, right? Where if you step back and you're in that recharge, like, man, I need some energy, man. I need to get it going.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm with you.
So when you talk about proximity and being around your people, and then, many have said that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend most time with. But one thing I've been discovering, as I grow my entrepreneurship career and as I get older is focusing on my energy. Right? Like who around me drains my energy, who gives me energy. Can you elaborate on the importance of your environment, with that who you have proximity to because either they're given or they're taken, right? Like how intentional should people, if they want to create success in this life, pay attention to that?
I think that's critical. And that's one of the things I've learned the most since the plane crash, because like we were talking about, right after the plane crash, I was getting interviewed. I still get interviewed some, but I was getting interviewed every day, 2 or 3 times a day. And people who had an agenda. And I started realizing these people's agendas, right? And some of them were sucking my energy to the point where I was almost demoralized when I got done with the interview. So I became much more intentional to put the right people around me and put buffers around me to be able to do that. Where, I make it a little more difficult now to get to me personally. If you really want to talk to me, you better figure out the way how to do it. And I didn't learn that till much later in life. And that's how these successful top 1% people do, because they're very intentional on who gets their energy. And so I've learned that. I'm not a professional at that yet. I'm not a master at that. I'm improving and making progress. But do not let people get with negative energy around you, because they are. There's people, every day someone's going to come with negative energy to you. They want to sap you. And if you let them, you'll bring down with you, right? So it's a lot more room at the top than there is at the bottom. So, let's go to the top where there's a lot more room and space. So I think that's be intentional with your time and who you surround yourself with. And one of the things that I learned likewise, Josh, and hopefully nobody who's listening have ever had this, but Tony taught me this likewise. It's like, love your family, but they may not be able to be a part of your world, right? Because, they may they're living their own life. And they may be they have their negative energy, and they may be bring you down when you go in the house, and they want to give you all their problems. Love your family, but surround yourself with people with a lot of energy, and your positive energy that you can feed off of, and make sure that delineation is there. And that's helped me too, because, my kids have problems. Your kids will probably have problems, right? And all of a sudden you're in that negative state of energy. Well, put yourself in that state for your family, but then get out of it, right? That's your family. So delineate your family with everybody else. That's helped me tremendously, that one little lesson.
Yeah. I was told by one of my coaches that in your life, you got to surround yourself with people, more people that feed you than need you, right? Meaning feed you that energy, feed you that inspiration, than need that, So love it, man. So, all right, I know we're getting long on time here, but just one last quick question for you.
Yep.
If knowing everything that you know now, right, through all the success that you've created, plus going through this major life experience that you went through, if you could rewind the clocks, like let's just say once you graduated college and you were kind of starting out in your professional career, if Dave today, knowing everything you know right now, could go back to younger Dave and give yourself 2 pieces of advice that you feel, if you followed, would have just fast forwarded all of this success, what would those 2 pieces of advice look like?
Well, the first one would be is I would immediately find myself a mentor. It took me 3 or 4 years to find that mentor. If I would go back and say, you know what, as soon as you graduate from college or during college, find that person who you can extrapolate those compress their decades of learning down to your days to be able to use it. But the second thing is, and I think this is the biggest one, and if I would ever do it again, because I was probably already focused. I know I was focused. I'm not probably. I'll be very candid. I was focused on my personal significance back then. It was all about me. I had to serve my needs. And I really probably didn't care about anybody else's needs. Now that I've learned what I've learned, I say, you know what? I would have checked my ego at the door and say, you know what? Let's focus on how we can add value to other people, because that's the secret sauce that everybody's looking for, is how can you add value to other people, right? Those are the ones who make the biggest success in life. The ones who are focused on personal significance, they may make $1 here, may make $1 there, but they're not happy, and they ultimately will shun people away from them. Give you a perfect example, and nothing against Kim Kardashian. She's earned $1 billion. But how many people are like, okay, I've had enough of this, right? Because it's all about personal significance with her. Where you look at some other people, like Mother Teresa, which I just wrote about, she was all about giving significance to people. And she was probably the most beloved person. Now she's a saint. So I would say that's the biggest thing I would do is, check my ego at the door, not worry about my personal significance, and to have faith in my Creator, knowing that, you know what? Let's give it out. The more I give out, it comes back tenfold. And that's the biggest change that I would make.
Yeah, love it. Powerful words. And those that are watching and listening, I know I end every podcast with this, but information without implementation truly is the start of delusion. Information is no longer power. It's taking that information, taking massive action on it that creates the life you want and deserve. And Dave shared so many amazing pieces of advice with you guys today. Take something that you learned. Don't wait. Take immediate action on it. So again, you can create that life you want and deserve. And I don't care where you're watching or listening to this, whether you're on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, the website. We're going to have links below to Dave's website, to his social media sites, so you can get the book, check out his speaking events. Text him that information, so you can do that, and that'll all be right below. And Dave, I know how busy you are. I truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day here. This has been a huge honor and a lot of fun, my friend.
Same here, man. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time, Josh.
Yeah, you got it, my friend. All right, you guys, we will see you next time.